Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you're texting a guy, talking to him, maybe even seeing him regularly, and yet, despite the chemistry, the connection, the moments you share, he just won't commit, he won't step up, he won't move forward, and you're left there wondering, why won't he? It makes no sense, right? Everything feels right, you're giving it your all, you're showing your best self, and still nothing shifts. He won't commit because he doesn't have to. That sounds simple, maybe even a little blunt, but it's one of the most powerful truths in modern dating. We live in a time where people are more connected than ever, yet emotional commitment feels harder to find. And part of the reason is that so many men are getting all the benefits of a relationship without ever having to fully show up in one. Think about it. He gets your emotional support. He gets your time, your affection, sometimes even your body. He gets the consistency of someone who checks in, who makes plans, who cares about what's going on in his life. But he hasn't made anything official. He hasn't taken a stand. He hasn't claimed a direction because he doesn't feel like he needs to. There's no urgency. There's no feeling that something real is at stake. When a man knows that he can have you in his life without putting skin in the game, he becomes comfortable. And comfort doesn't push people to act. In fact, comfort often leads to stagnation. You might be thinking, but I'm not making it easy. I've made it clear that I want something serious. And yet you're still there. You still answer the texts. You still meet up when he asks. You still open your heart even though your needs aren't being met. Words mean very little when the actions don't match. Telling someone what you expect is not the same as showing them through your boundaries and behavior that you're willing to walk away if they can't meet you there. Men are not oblivious. They know when you want more. They can sense your disappointment. But as long as they're not losing anything by staying where things are, most will keep riding that wave. It's easier, it's low effort, and for some, it feels good to have the validation, the connection, the presence of someone who genuinely cares, without having to fully step up. That's not to say all men are manipulative or playing games, but human behavior is driven by incentives. If someone gets all the warmth, affection, and loyalty of a relationship without needing to commit, why would they suddenly feel compelled to make a change? You become part of the routine, familiar, reliable, safe, but not prioritized. And when that happens, the relationship dynamic shifts. He starts leading the rhythm of your connection. He becomes the one who decides when to be close, when to pull back, when to show up, and when to vanish for days. And every time you respond with patience, forgiveness, or hope that he'll soon be ready, you reinforce the idea that he can keep doing this indefinitely. He's not feeling any pressure to make a choice. You're already acting like a partner. You're already giving him the emotional security of someone who is committed. So, in his eyes, the situation doesn't demand change. He doesn't have to define anything because the undefined space is still giving him what he wants. That space between friendship and relationship, between casual and serious, is a sweet spot for people who enjoy the perks without the pressure. And that's where he'll stay, until he either sees a genuine risk of losing you or meets someone who doesn't let him linger in indecision. The truth is, people don't change because we want them to. They change when the current conditions no longer serve them, when the comfort zone is no longer comfortable, when the cost of not changing becomes higher than the effort of change. Attention is not the same as intention. This is where so many people get emotionally misled, especially when there seems to be a strong connection. A guy might be texting you all the time, calling you late at night, sending you memes, asking how your day was, even complimenting you in subtle but meaningful ways. That kind of attention can feel validating, exciting, and emotionally comforting. It fills in the silence. It makes you feel seen, but that doesn't automatically mean he's planning a future with you or even thinking long-term. Attention can come from a place of habit, ego, loneliness, or convenience, while intention comes from a place of clarity, purpose, and emotional investment. The problem is, it's easy to get swept up in attention. We interpret consistency in communication as commitment. We assume that frequent messages are a sign of deeper meaning. But attention without action is often just noise. It's someone occupying space in your mind and your heart without doing the actual work of building something real. He might enjoy flirting with you, making you laugh, or having deep conversations late into the night. But if he's not taking steps to define the relationship, to progress things, or to invest in your emotional security, then the attention is just a surface-level connection. It feels intimate, but it lacks direction. You have to ask yourself, what is his attention actually leading to? Is he making plans to see you consistently? Is he introducing you into his life, showing you that you matter in a long-term context? Or is he just keeping you emotionally attached with a breadcrumb trail of affection and digital connection? There are so many ways people give just enough to keep you there, without ever offering something real. And the danger lies in our willingness to hold on to the little signs, the almosts, the maybes, hoping they eventually add up to something significant. Intention looks very different. When someone has real intention with you, there's clarity. They're not afraid to talk about the future. They want to know where you stand. They don't shy away from commitment or deflect when things start getting serious. You don't have to constantly guess how they feel or where you stand in their life. You don't feel like you're auditioning for a role you're not even sure exists. Intention creates stability, not confusion. It brings peace, not overthinking. It makes you feel chosen, not tolerated. People who have no intention of committing will still give attention to keep you emotionally engaged. They may not want a real relationship, but they don't want to lose you either. You become a source of comfort, an emotional buffer, a validation source when they're lonely, bored, or feeling insecure. And the more you respond to their attention, the more they continue the cycle, not because they're building something meaningful with you, but because they enjoy the way your presence makes them feel. This is why it's crucial to separate how someone makes you feel in the moment from what they're actually doing in the bigger picture. Just because he's sweet sometimes, or says the right things occasionally, or even shows vulnerability, doesn't mean he's invested. You need to observe whether his actions align with the words, whether his availability matches his energy, whether he's making space in his life for you in ways that require consistency and accountability. Attention may feel good in the short term, but it's intention that builds something worth trusting. When someone really sees you, values you, and wants to grow with you, it shows in ways that don't need to be analyzed or decoded. Attention is easy to give. Intention takes courage, clarity, and commitment. Real desire leads to real action, not mixed signals. When someone genuinely wants to be with you, there's a natural consistency that shows up in the way they behave. You don't have to beg for clarity, chase for attention, or constantly guess what's going on between you. People often make the mistake of interpreting confusion as complexity, thinking that if things feel uncertain, it must be because the person is conflicted or emotionally deep. But the truth is, when someone truly desires you, they move toward you, not away. They make space for you, they follow through, and they don't leave you questioning where you stand. Mixed signals are often a sign that someone is unsure, unavailable, or simply keeping their options open. And yet, many people cling to the high points in the connection, the sweet texts, the moments of closeness, the chemistry, as if those isolated events outweigh the overall inconsistency. But someone who is serious about you doesn't show up in moments, they show up over time. Real desire makes people brave. It pushes them to communicate honestly, to make time for you even when they're busy, to prioritize your needs even when it's inconvenient. There's no guessing, no decoding, no trying to figure out what a late night message or a week of silence really means. You'll notice a difference in how safe and calm you feel with someone who genuinely desires you. It doesn't create emotional chaos. It doesn't leave you anxiously waiting for a reply or wondering if you said too much. Real desire doesn't just create excitement, it creates clarity. You start to feel grounded, even in the early stages of a connection, because the effort is mutual and the interest is obvious. On the other hand, when someone's behavior swings between hot and cold, what you're seeing isn't passion, it's uncertainty. And uncertainty often has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with their own emotional limitations or conflicting priorities. What people forget is that desire is not just a feeling, it's a driver of behavior. If someone says they like you, but they never initiate plans, go days without checking in, or only show up when it's convenient for them, that's not desire in action. That's convenience. That's minimal effort. That's emotional laziness dressed up as casual interest. Someone who desires you doesn't wait until they might lose you to take you seriously. They don't wait until you pull away to suddenly find the words they couldn't say before. And they definitely don't make you feel like you're hard to love or too much for wanting something stable and committed. People make time for the things that matter to them. They show up for what they want. They remove obstacles. They get creative. They don't just talk about feelings, they demonstrate them. They don't just tell you they care, they prove it. And this is where you have to be honest with yourself. Are you holding onto someone's potential, or are you watching their patterns? Are you building stories in your head based on what you wish they do, or are you looking at what they're actually doing? The clearest way to see someone's desire is to look at their consistency. Words may spark interest, but it's consistent action that builds trust. So if you find yourself constantly trying to interpret what his behavior means, going back and forth, wondering whether he's really in or out, that's your answer. You shouldn't have to become an emotional detective to figure out someone's intentions. Real desire doesn't create mystery. It brings things into focus. It simplifies everything because it comes with action that doesn't require justification or explanation. When someone truly wants to be with you, their actions eliminate doubt instead of feeding it. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. This idea is one of the most overlooked truths in relationships, yet it shapes the entire dynamic between you and another person. Every time you accept behavior that falls short of what you truly want or deserve, you're silently communicating that it's okay. Not through your words, but through your choices. People learn your boundaries not by what you say, but by what you consistently allow. If someone cancels on you last minute, doesn't follow through on plans, disappears for days without explanation, and you still remain emotionally available to them, that sends a message whether you intend it to or not, that they can continue treating you that way. It's not about being rude or confrontational. It's about understanding that your standards are not set by what you hope for, but by what you reinforce through your actions. When you stay in a situation where you're not being prioritized, where your needs are being dismissed, or where respect is inconsistent. You're essentially voting for that treatment with your presence, and people will keep giving you what they know they can get away with. The dynamic doesn't shift because they suddenly become more respectful. It shifts when you shift the standard. When you remove your energy from situations that don't nourish you, when you no longer entertain half-hearted effort, when you don't answer the late-night text from someone who only reaches out when it's convenient, that's when people start to understand that your time and heart are not available on a discount. The problem is, so many people are afraid to walk away from mediocre treatment because they believe if they just hang on a little longer, things will change. That if they're more understanding, more patient, more forgiving, the other person will wake up and finally treat them the way they should have from the start. But the hard truth is that what you allow will continue. Hoping someone changes is not a strategy. Giving them more chances doesn't magically build respect. Respect is earned, and it's maintained when you have the courage to enforce your standards, even when it's uncomfortable. We often think we're being kind by giving someone endless chances, but real kindness includes self-respect. You cannot expect others to treat you with high regard when you're showing them you'll accept less. You cannot expect commitment when you're rewarding inconsistency, and the more you tolerate behavior that doesn't align with what you truly want, the more you disconnect from yourself. You start to shrink your needs, dull your voice, and suppress your instincts in order to keep the peace or avoid loss. But in doing that, you're sacrificing the most important relationship you have, the one with yourself. Every time you choose to stay silent about what hurts you, every time you minimize your own feelings just to keep someone around, you are reinforcing that their comfort is more important than your emotional well-being. But a healthy relationship isn't built on one person constantly adjusting and the other person coasting. It's built on mutual respect, and that starts with how you respect yourself. People pay attention to what you permit. If you hold firm to your boundaries, if you make it clear that you won't stay in spaces where you're not valued, you teach them that being in your life is a privilege, not an entitlement. Your standards won't push away the right person. They will attract the person who already values those things, and they'll repel the ones who are never willing to rise to the occasion. You don't have to keep convincing someone to treat you better. You just have to stop giving your energy to those who don't. The moment you stop tolerating less is the moment you begin to create space for more. The more you reinforce your boundaries with consistency, the more you align with people who genuinely want to meet you at that level. Clarity comes from observing actions, not decoding words. One of the biggest traps people fall into in relationships is trying to interpret every little thing someone says, as if there's some hidden meaning behind their words that will finally unlock the truth. He says he misses you, but he hasn't seen you in weeks. He says he's not ready for a relationship, but still flirts and texts like he wants one. He talks about the future, but makes no real effort in the present. And so you find yourself overanalyzing, holding on to the possibility that maybe his words mean more than they appear to. Maybe he's just scared. Maybe he's confused. Maybe he needs time. But what you miss in the process is that his actions have been telling you everything you need to know all along. People reveal their priorities through behavior. If someone genuinely wants to pursue a relationship, they'll show it through their consistency, effort, and willingness to invest emotionally and practically. They'll follow up, they'll make space for you, they'll communicate clearly, not because they have to, but because they want to. When someone is serious about you, you don't need to decode anything. They make it obvious. There's no cryptic behavior, no emotional whiplash, no half-commitments disguised as deep connection. There's a sense of direction, a willingness to move things forward. Even when it's imperfect, we often give too much credit to words because they feel good in the moment. Words give us hope, something to hold on to, but words without action are just noise. They don't build anything real. And when there's a gap between what someone says and what they do, you have to believe the behavior, not the story, not the apology, not the promise, because actions always expose the truth. Someone who keeps you in a cycle of highs and lows, always talking a good game but never changing the reality, isn't confused. They're comfortable keeping you in a space where they benefit without effort. Clarity doesn't come from asking the same questions over and over. It doesn't come from trying to figure out what he meant when he said something vague, or from looking for hidden meaning in how he texts. Clarity is found in patterns. Does he show up for you? Does he follow through? Is he emotionally present? Or does he disappear when things get real? Those are the answers you're looking for, even if you don't want to hear them. And when someone truly wants to be with you, you won't feel like you're doing detective work just to understand their feelings. You'll feel seen, understood, and safe. Trying to find clarity through words alone will keep you stuck in a loop of overthinking and second guessing. It leads to emotional exhaustion, where every small gesture feels like a test or a clue. You become hyper, attuned to changes in tone, response time, or phrasing, looking for signs that things are improving, even when nothing fundamental has shifted. But that's not connection, that's uncertainty. And uncertainty should never be your emotional home. Real clarity feels peaceful. It doesn't require analysis. It comes from watching someone show up with intention and consistency. When someone's actions align with their words, you don't feel like you're constantly searching for evidence of their care. You experience it directly. And when those actions are missing, when promises are made but not kept, when affection is given but responsibility is avoided, that's your answer. No matter how good it feels to hear someone say they care, if they're not showing up in a way that proves it, those words are just temporary comfort. Clarity comes when you step back from what someone says and start paying attention to what they consistently do. The moment you stop waiting is the moment you take your power back. There is a quiet kind of exhaustion that builds up when you're always waiting for the text that doesn't come, waiting for the conversation that never happens, waiting for the moment he finally sees your worth, finally decides to step up, finally chooses you the way you've been choosing him. You don't realize it at first, but all that waiting starts to reshape your identity. You start organizing your days around the possibility of him. You measure your emotions by his level of engagement. If he reaches out, your mood lifts. If he pulls back, you shrink and spiral. That kind of emotional limbo doesn't just affect your love life. It affects your self-esteem, your focus, your energy, your joy. When you're stuck waiting, you start negotiating with your own standards. You tell yourself stories to make sense of the inconsistency. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he just needs a little more time, and so you wait. You keep the door open, even if it means standing in the doorway for months or years, hoping he'll walk through with clarity and intention. But he doesn't, and deep down you know why. Because people don't need endless time to recognize what's valuable. When someone truly sees your worth, they don't risk losing you over their indecision. They don't keep you on stand by while they figure out what they want. Every time you put your life on hold for someone who won't commit, you're delaying your own growth. You're freezing your potential. You're building a future around someone who hasn't even committed to being in your present. And the more time you spend in that space, the more disoriented you become. You start to question your standards. You wonder if you're asking for too much. You think maybe you just need to be a little more understanding, a little more patient, a little more easygoing. But in reality, what you need is to stop waiting and start choosing. The most powerful shift happens when you decide that your life will no longer revolve around someone else's indecision. When you stop checking your phone constantly, when you stop analyzing every interaction, when you stop giving so much energy to someone who isn't showing up for you in a meaningful way, that's when everything begins to change, not because they suddenly wake up and do better, but because you do. You start reclaiming your time, your voice, your boundaries. You begin to rebuild your self-worth from a place of ownership instead of lack. The moment you stop waiting, you create space for something healthier, something more aligned, something that doesn't require you to compromise your needs just to be chosen. And more importantly, you start to reconnect with the version of yourself that isn't dependent on someone else's validation. You begin to realize that love isn't about waiting for someone to be ready. It's about recognizing who already is. Someone who sees you clearly, shows up fully, and doesn't make you feel like you have to earn their affection one breadcrumb at a time. It's not always easy to stop waiting. It takes courage. It takes letting go of the fantasy of who they might become. It takes accepting that the version of them you've been hoping for may never arrive. But in doing so, you gain something far more valuable. You gain yourself, your clarity, your freedom, your emotional space to welcome something better. You stop living in the gray zone of almosts and start stepping into the reality of what you deserve. The moment you stop waiting isn't about giving up on love. It's about giving up on the version of love that keeps you stuck, small and second, guessing you're worth the truth about why he won't commit, why he sends mixed signals, why he keeps you close but never close enough. It all comes back to what you accept, what you ignore, and what you continue to hope will change. You've heard the promises, felt the pull of attention, tried to make sense of the inconsistency. But now you see clearly that attention without action means nothing, that desire without effort is just a temporary thrill, and that someone's words are only as valuable as the behavior that follows them. You don't need to wait for clarity from someone who's already shown you what they're willing and unwilling to give. You set the standard. You define what stays and what goes. And the moment you stop waiting, stop tolerating, and start choosing yourself is the moment everything changes. Because real love doesn't come from holding on. It comes from letting go of what was never really holding you in the first place.